Hello everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. I'm Steve and today I'm going to do an overview on this motherboard from ASRock. This is the Z87 OC Formula. Alright, so here we're at the front of the box. I wanted to show you guys a couple things before we actually open it up. This is a Z87 chipset based motherboard. That is of course meaning that it's Intel based. It is using the 4th generation processors from Intel, that's aka Haswell. We're looking at the 4th gen Intel Core i7, i5, and i3 processors. Also supports Xeon, Pentium, and Celeron processors as well, as long as they're 4th gen. Beyond that, it's also not backwards compatible. Keep that in mind. It is LGA socket 1150. So down here at the bottom in the front of the box, you can see some of the badges here that show what it's compatible with. Intel Core processors, as well as the Z87 chipset, AMD's Crossfire, NVIDIA's SLI, also Windows 8 ready. It has Hdmi stamp of approval and Dolby DTS sound. So let me go ahead and drop this down real quick just to show you guys the very first flap. Kind of covers some of the features of this board. As I mentioned before, it is an overclocking beast, but we're going to talk about a couple other things first. They are including a conformal coating on the motherboard, which essentially keeps it from being affected by any kind of conductive liquids. Obviously, if water was spilt onto it or anything like that, depending on what type of liquid you're using in your water cooling solution, you wouldn't have to worry about it with this particular board. Also, it's trying to protect you from corrosion and dust. And if you're using some more exotic cooling methods like liquid nitrogen or liquid helium, you've got extra protection there. Beyond that, it does have an HDMI in, which I'll show you in just a moment here when we get the board out. It's basically allowing you to use the single monitor, if you have a single monitor setup at your house, to act as a pass-through, allowing you to plug in other devices and basically share the same monitor just via the system here. Also, Intel providing the chip for the LAN. That is a gigabit Ethernet port here, and I'll get into the chip in just a moment. Down at the bottom left here, it is utilizing Purity Sound, which is basically a combination of hardware and software solutions. First and foremost, it's a Realtek ALC 1150 chip, providing 115 decibel signal-noise ratio differential codec, and on top of that, they're also providing the Texas Instruments NE5532 chip, providing an op-amp basically from Texas Instruments to give you support for up to 600 ohm headphones, so, and give you a little extra power for that op-amp. I'm going to flip the box up and show you the rest of it. Now we're actually on to the overclocking feature set of this board. Now first and foremost, we have power, and then monitoring, cooling, and the connector kit. So I guess I should probably start with the power kit here. You're looking at a 12 power phase design. It also employs premium alloy chokes. They're providing MFC multiple filter caps, as well as a dual stack MOSFET and a digital power. Now all those things combined are giving you better board lifespan, as well as providing the best, cleanest power for overclocking. Just giving you the best setup with the best components that ASRock had thrown on this board, try and help you guys out in your overclocking endeavors. On the top right here, we do have a monitoring solution. They basically have an OLED surface mounted onto the board. I'll show you in just a moment. Basically giving the ability to see debug codes, look at the current temperatures, as well as frequencies and voltages. Date and time, I think, are included in that as well. The multiple different thermal sensors across this board, you can basically set up which temperatures you're looking to get, or at least monitor. Then if we move down here to this window, you can actually see the cooling solution they're providing, the twin power cooling, which is essentially, it has water cooling ability, has a couple barbs on there to connect your loop, as well as the ability to not use that if you don't want to. You could basically just go air cooled with that and it would work just fine. If we go down to the bottom here, we have all the different connectors for the connector kit. Essentially distortion-free slot, high-density power connector, and 15 microns of gold across the board to help you minimize connection issues, and as well as providing you I guess it's a non-corrosive surface connections, and giving you better power, as well as providing any kind of distortion-free connections possible. And this is an 8-layer PCB. They are also providing you with a premium thermal compound from Gelid. It's a GC Extreme thermal compound. And one last thing before I walk away from this box, we do have a set of specifications here on the side. I just want to show you guys that. So if you wanted to look quickly at what this board can provide for you, there you go. Keep in mind also the form factor is an eATX motherboard, which basically means it's going to be a little bit wider than a standard ATX motherboard. It measures at 12 by 10.4 inches. All right, guys, so here's all the accessories that come in the box for this particular motherboard. Start first with the disc here. It is the standard driver's disc that comes with the box, or comes with this board, but you're obviously going to want to go to ASRock's website or Intel's website and download the newest drivers for the chipset. On top of that, they also provide for you an OC Formula badge. You can put that on the front of your case and just kind of show off the fact that you have this motherboard in there. Moving along, we do have the manual here, I should say, the user manual, and it's going to show you a bit of information about the motherboard as well as how to install memory and the CPU. If you need help with that, that's there. You can always look at the videos on Newegg TV as well. So we also have the software setup guide, which essentially just kind of walks you through the different features of the UEFI and specifically what they do. So if you need a little bit of help with that, then this is a good place to start if you're not downloading the PDF from ASRock's website. Then they provide for you the ASRock Home Cloud setup, kind of a bit of information on how to set up a remote wake connection via the Intel NIC, as well as a bit of other information in here. We're not going to go over that in this video, but it is provided if you decide you want to do that. They are also providing you with a USB 3.0 3.5-inch tray here, bay tray I should say, and of course the screws to attach them. But you could actually remove this. Actually, that's a terrible spot. You could actually unscrew the USB 3.0 connectors and actually reconnect that into this, which is an expansion slot cover, and essentially not have to use the front of your case at all. You could actually attach it to the back. And there are two USB 3.0 headers to connect to on this particular motherboard. They also provide for you that Gelid premium thermal paste that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video. And they do give you two of these power connectors. They're actually really just adapters. You'll be able to go 4-pin Molex to the SATA connector here, providing power if your motherboard, or excuse me, if your PSU doesn't provide those connectors, you'll have them. Also, this is just an SLI bridge that they're providing, just a small ribbon, pretty standard. And they're providing for you 10 different SATA 3 connecting cables. So if you needed to have lots of drives connected, you actually have plenty here. There are five 90-degree, and there are 5 of the straight. So you get one in each one of these bags, so a straight and a 90-degree, also with the retention clips on there. Those are backwards compatible with SATA revision 2 and 1. I forgot to mention too, everything came inside this bag. Kind of started with everything on the desk because that's the way I like to do it, but they do give you this kind of full faux velvet bag that they provide. Along with that, oops, that's probably pretty tough to see, there's also a very small screw that they're providing because this does have a mini PCIe slot, expansion slot on the motherboard. So this is just what you'd use in order to attach whatever card you decide to use for it. Then they give you a couple of these stands actually. So you could basically just plug these into the back of the motherboard through where the screw would go to attach it to an actual base plate, motherboard plate, excuse me, on the chassis. And that would basically give you the ability to put this motherboard anywhere you wouldn't need a case. So something to keep in mind, I suppose. And finally, they are providing the I/O shield. Standard I/O shield, nothing fancy here. It's all labeled. And that is pretty much the basics. And finally, on to the OC Formula motherboard. So ASRock did a nice job here. Take a look at the color scheme they went with. Looks like it's black and gold and or yellow, depending on how you want to describe it. The heat sinks here, clearly black and gold. Also providing you with those barbs, as I mentioned before, if you want to end up going water cooling or just keep it the air-cooled method now. The black glossy PCB is actually glossy due to that conformal coating. I'll just show you the back here so you can get kind of a better look at it. Kind of the way that it reflects there. But beyond that, on the back, there are several locations that you can actually remove the heat sinks from this side using some screws here to be removed. Those are Phillips head screws. And if I flip it back again, just to get back to the front of the motherboard without knocking off the stand, I want to tell you first that there are several different fan headers. Actually, I think it's 6, 7. I'm not sure actually. Let me just tan them up real quick. So we do have a 4-pin PWM fan header here, another one here that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that right? 2, looks like 8, okay. So there's only 2 4-pin PWM fan headers though, one at the top here and one at the bottom, but just keep in mind, it seems like you have them all over the motherboard here. And I just want to start off first at the bottom right of the board, and we'll take a look at what's going on here. And right here we have a 4-pin speaker header, so that'll provide some troubleshooting steps for you should you need to have that speaker. Also, there's a power LED header here, followed by underneath that the front panel header, allowing you to connect the switches and whatnot. But if you end up not wanting to use a chassis switch at all, I actually have surface mounted switches here, the power and the reset button. That's right below the 2 64 megabyte chips, providing the UEFI somewhere a place to live for them. Next to that, we do have that special Status OLED screen, and the screen's only this portion here, but essentially allowing you to take a look at a couple different voltage as well as temperatures. Keep an eye on them, as a matter of fact, as well as taking a look at the time and date if you needed that. Reset CMOS button here. Next to that, actually, let me prop this up slightly so I can just see everything. Next to that, we do have a switch to switch you between BIOS A and BIOS B. Good backup plan there in case something happens to one of the 2 BIOS. Then we have a USB 2.0 header, another USB 2.0 header, and followed by a COM port header. And if I tilt this up, you might actually be able to see here. So that was a little quick, Paul, I apologize. 4-pin ATX power, that's supplemental power for the Pci Express lanes, and also to provide power for those video cards if you end up having several video cards and end up needing a little bit more juice. And next to that, to the left, we do have the HD audio front panel header. Also kind of neat, they also have the 8-layer PCB here. It's probably really tough to see, but basically as it gets deeper, you can't see them because there's more layers there. Above that, we have the Purity Sound chips. I should say at least one's a chip, the other one is an op amp, but it is using the Realtek 7.1 channel HD audio ALC 1150 codec. And it's probably even more difficult to see, but there's a small separation here between this portion of the PCB and the rest of it. That's kind of to keep the analog signal over here as clean as possible and with as little interference from the rest of the board. So that being said, I want to show you the PCI Express slots. Now there's 4 full-length PCI Express slots. The first one here is actually native to the Z87 chipset. That's an Gen 3 X16 PCI Express slot, and that would be the primary one you're going to want to use when you first install your very first video card. Then we have one here that's also Gen 3 X16, and below that we have 2 more. But if you were going to go SLI in this particular setup, this is actually Gen 2 8X, and this is also Gen 2 8X. I should mention that as well. But if you were going to go SLI, let's say, so you'd obviously use these 2, we're going to have 8X here and 8 lanes here as well, so that drops down a little bit. And then if you're going to go 3-way, that's actually going to drop you into crossfire territory. You're going 8, 4, and 4. And then if you go 4-way, you're going 8, 4, 4, and 4. So keep that in mind when you're setting up your setup on multiple GPU configurations. Then we have the PCI Express X1 slots here, one here and one here, so a total of 2. If you end up needing that kind of connectivity, there you go. Above, between the 2 main PCI Express slots, we also have a mini PCI Express slot, so essentially allowing you to connect in maybe like a wireless adapter or something like that. In fact, if you buy the OC Formula AC version of this particular motherboard, they provide you with a Bluetooth and a Wi-Fi module to plug in there, as well as antennas. Okay, aside from that, we do have the battery here providing power for the UEFI to keep track of everything, as well as the clock. Then we have a very small jumper, and that's going to be another option if you wanted to clear the CMOS on this particular motherboard. Then if I move right along here, this is the heatsink for the Z87 chipset. Of course, the Z87 chipset providing you with 6 SATA Gen 3 or Revision 3 ports native, as well as that PCI Express Gen 3 X16 slot, and 6 SATA ports, 6 USB 3.0 ports on the back I/O. And that's all native stuff, but in fact on this particular motherboard they have 10 SATA ports, so let me go ahead and spin that around to show you instead of the 6. So 6 of these are native, Not sure which ones they are, but I know that 4 of them are not, and the 4 that aren't are actually being provided by another chip. In this particular case, that is the ASMedia ASM1061 chip that's providing you with 4 additional SATA revision 3 ports, so giving you 6 gigabit per second connection on more than the standard 6, so kind of nice there. But let me just spin this back down again, and we'll start right above the SATA ports, if I can get it balanced. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so right over here, we do have 2 USB 3.0 front panel headers. Now, it's important to mention, though, that there is a difference between the 2 of these. This one here is actually sharing resources with the PCI Express Slot 6, PCI Express 6 slot, essentially meaning that when you have the PCI Express 6 slot populated with a video card or any other card in general, it's going to drop down the functionality speed of this USB 3.0 controller down to USB 2.0. Just something to keep in mind. So you're definitely going to want to stick to this one. You may not even need both of them in general anyways, but keep that in mind. Then we also have some dip switches here. The 4 here, the 1, 2, 3, 4, that's actually referring to the main full-length 16, the main full-length PCI Express slots, I should say, because they're not all 16. And you can basically turn them on and off depending on if you're trying to do some kind of benchmarking or maybe some troubleshooting, trying to figure out if you're having some trouble with your setup. So that's something nice as well. Then we have 2 more dip switches here. The very first one is this one here. That's actually the slow mode setting. That actually lowers the frequency of the CPU down to the lowest possible speed, I guess, to give you the most functionality to start up if you end up having some problems with it. Aside from that, then we also have another dip switch here that provides you with the ability to, actually I can't read it from there. Oh, LN2. So basically if you were going to use liquid nitrogen to cool it, it kind of frees it up from that, boot mode error if it's too cold while it's being started up. We do also have a USB port here that's actually giving you the ability to flash the BIOS in the UEFI. It's called Instant Flash from ASRock, but basically allowing you to just pop in a FAT32 formatted, or I think it's FAT16 and 12, I want to say. Anyway, you could just drop that in there with the BIOS file in the root folder, start up the BIOS, and then just flash it directly from that. And next to that, we also have the ATX power connector. It's a 24-pin power connector, giving power to the motherboard. Above that, we have the V probe. Basically allows you to get different read points to measure the onboard components while you're overclocking. Things like the CPU comp, the core 0 voltage, and CPU ring voltage, just to name a few of them. Above that, I might actually have to tilt this just slightly so you might be able to see it a little better. But we have 3 surface-mounted buttons. The first 2 here are, if you've guessed it, it's the ones that allow you to overclock it on the fly. So plus means go up frequency, minus means go down in frequency. You can just overclock that while you're already booted into your OS. Now, down below that, we have the menu button. That's allowing you to switch the Status OLED screen down at the bottom of the motherboard to switch it between different displays. So it's going to show you, something like the date and time, or different voltages, or different temperatures, things of that sort. So to the left of that, we have 4 of the DDR3 DIMM slots here. These DIMM slots are special in the fact that they only have the clasps here at the top. The bottom, there's no locking mechanism, so that way when you have a video card popped into the main PCIe slot, you don't have to worry about them coming out and getting caught. I'm sure you guys have seen this many times before, but just to explain it in case you haven't. Makes it easier when you pop one side out, you can just take one corner out at a time and not have to worry about that getting caught or anything. In terms of speeds, the RAM here, it's going to support a maximum of, before speeds, let's talk about quantity, 32 gigs, 8 gigs each stick. And the maximum is 32, as I mentioned. It's going to accept DDR3 1600, 1333, 1066 megatransfers per second, but if you overclock it, it'll accept 3000, 2933, 2800, 2400, 2133, and 1866 megatransfers per second. They're also supporting Intel's XMP, that is 1.3 and version 1.2, Intel's extreme memory profiles. So to the left of that, we do have the LGA 1150 socket, and that is provided for your Haswell, aka 4th gen Intel Core processors. Now around that, we do have everything here cooling down the power delivery. If I tilt that just slightly, you might actually be able to get a look at the chokes and some of the capacitors there. And if I haven't already mentioned it twice, let's just mention it 3 times. We also have the barbs here to allow you to run your own custom loop and basically keep this thing cool via water cooling, or if you wanted to just keep it with the air, you can just leave that fan going and it'll be really happy doing that. One last thing, I'll flip this back up here. We have supplemental CPU power, 2 8-pin ATX power connectors, allowing you to give that CPU just a little more power should it need it. I'm going to go ahead and flip that around and show you the front panel I/O. Let's see if I can get this propped up just right to do that. Okay, starting on the left, we have 2 USB 2.0 ports, a PS2 port, and then they actually have that HDMI in. We have an HDMI out, as well as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different USB 3.0 ports. And actually, there should only be, let's see, there should be 6, so that's actually provided by another chip. That's the e-tron EJ188H chip. That's providing a little bit of extra USB connectivity here. At the top here we have an Intel Gigabit Ethernet port, and that particular Intel chip is the i217V chip. We have yet another CMOS clearing method, that's just a surface mounted switch here, as well as the Realtek audio provided here. Okay guys, that wraps up this overview of ASRock's Z87 OC Formula motherboard. Now if you liked what you saw today, don't forget to click the like button. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe to any of our various YouTube channels, and we'll see you soon.